Hello everyone. Welcome to the second session of the celebration of the small-scale fisheries for the World Oceans Day. My name is Ratana Chinpakdi, and I would like to welcome everybody to this panel discussion to talk about small-scale fisheries and the importance of small-scale fisheries, in particular, in the conversation about ocean sustainability. But the reason why we're doing this, which is bringing the session to different parts of the world, is because we need to recognize that in each region of the world, there are different situations, there are some specific contexts that we need to deal with. So last week, we have been having a webinar every day to talk about global situation with some local examples. But today, we just had a session that we spoke about with colleagues in Australia and the Pacific Islands, and there were very good discussion about the situation over there. So it is indeed really important for us to be able to do this, which is to bring the conversation to people in Asian region. And in particular today, we will be focusing on Southeast Asia and South Asia, but I'm sure our audience will be coming from different places. So our audience, if you are in the audience watching us from YouTube, please feel free to say hello through the comment box, and then we will be able to pop your name up on the screen, and then we'll be able to have the conversation with you. So unlike last week, we had we set it up like a webinar with presentations. This week, really, today really is more about conversation. So we wanted to invite people to engage in the discussion and conversation about the important topics that the important issues affecting small-scale fisheries. In particular, we would be interested in learning, about the situation in COVID-19, but we also be interested in learning about whether you have any thoughts about what we might want to start thinking about as we move in eventually into the post-COVID, and how's that? What would things be for small-scale fisheries as we move into that phase? So let me start by bringing our first panelist, and it's truly a great pleasure to have you, Professor John Kurian, with us today to really share the wealth of experience that he has. So, I mean, I don't think we need to introduce John too much, and that's exactly why John put very short bio on the website for us. But again, there's hardly any need for introduction. So John is a development practitioner, has been working on small-scale fisheries issues since 1973, lived and worked with small-scale fishing communities in India, Cambodia, Indonesia, and he's a founder, member of the International Collective in Support of Fish Workers, or as we know it as ICSF. And currently, John is a visiting professor at Asim Premji University, Bengaluru in India. So welcome, John, to the session.
Thank you, Ratana.
Thank you.
Happy to be here.
Thanks. Okay, so the second speaker is Yin Yen, and Yin has been over 11 years of having working experience in community development in Myanmar, has been participating in a planning program and capacity building and policy analysis. So he has a Master of Public Policy in Australian National University, and an Executive Master of Development Policies and Practices in Graduate Institute in Geneva, and has a certificate course in Integrated Sustainable Coastal Development from the University of Gothenburg in Sweden. So he's currently working as a small-scale fishery expert for FAO and local governance expert in Center for Good Governance, and the main research interest is to promote and protect small-scale producers through good governance practices. So welcome, Yin, to the session. Just turn you on to mic a little bit so that we can hear you. Okay?
Thank you, Rudina. Happy to be here.
Thank you very much. Okay, the next speaker is Julius Gerhin. So Julius has been working with RARE on the field of marine science and coastal resource management for over 20 years, together with different academic institutions, local government units, NGOs, and government agencies in the Philippines. So he's been working with RARE for 6 years now as a senior manager for program implementation for its Fish Forever program. And Fish Forever is RARE's innovative coastal fisheries program that pairs community-based conservation approach with spatial management to restore and protect small-scale fisheries in the Philippines. So the program solution is built on principles of behavioral change and combines managed access with marine sanctuaries. So I'm sure we're going to be hearing more about that. So welcome to the session, Julius. The next speaker is Professor Mahmoud Islam. So Mahmoud is an assistant professor at Sylhet Agriculture University in Bangladesh and is now a visiting professor at Memorial University in St. John. So he's sort of like, a few blocks away from me. So Mahmoud received his PhD from the University of Bremen in Germany, and the PhD research contextualized poverty and vulnerability in the livelihoods of coastal fishing communities in Bangladesh. His recent research interests include livelihoods and well-being analysis of small-scale fisheries, climate change, impacts and disaster risk in coastal Bangladesh. And recently, he led a research project on implementation of the voluntary guidelines for securing sustainable small-scale fisheries in Bangladesh. So, welcome to the session.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for inviting me, and hello, everybody.
Okay, that's great. Now, the final speaker is Susana Sea, and Susana is a fishery and aquaculture officer at the Food and Agriculture Organization of United Nations Regional Office for Asia and the Pacific in Bangkok, Thailand. That's where I would rather be than being in St. John's at the moment, but cannot travel. So Susana is a social scientist and started working in the fisheries and aquaculture sector since 1989. Her area of work includes small-scale fisheries, particularly on the human dimension and stakeholder participation. Prior to joining FAO in 2005, she worked at the Aquaculture Department of Southeast Asian Fisheries Development Center, known as SEFDEC, in the Philippines, and briefly at the World Fish Center in Malaysia. All right. So,
thank you, Ratana. Good morning, everyone.
Hi. Thank you. So this is again, we organized this as a conversation. We wanted to be able to talk about the important topics and the situation of small scale fisheries in the region. And I apologize in advance the audience for Julius going to be popping in and out. It seems that his internet connection might actually be affected, and therefore we may or may not be seeing him depending on how it goes. Now, perhaps again, I just wanted to remind the audience here that you wanted to say hello in the live chat box. We will be able to see who you are, and if you like to put any comments, you have any question to ask, that will be the time to do that would come. So you definitely can post any comments at any time during the presentation as well. Okay, so we're gonna start with John. So I have invited our panelists to give like an opening remarks for about 5 minutes or so, just to set the stage, and then we would be the point for me about setting the stage is, from my perspective, is that when we had the webinar on Monday on this topic, we learned so much about the global situation, and we learned about different regional contexts as well. But I think today in this particular session, we want to dig a little bit deeper into in terms of how things are, but more importantly, to think about what can what have been some of the responses that we have that you have seen, and whether you feel that we are on the right track or not, and whether more can be done, what more can be done, and then to think about post-COVID, what will be some of the opportunities, what will be some of the things that we really need to get ready as we are, as we move forward. I also want to contextualize this around the 2022, which is the International Year for Artisanal Fisheries and Aquaculture. We only have a year and a half before the start of that artisanal year. So therefore, there might be something that we really, if you'd like to share your thoughts in terms of what we might want to do collectively, and what would be some of the milestones that we want to try to work towards, that would be very good. Okay, so I would remove everybody from the deck, including myself, and we're gonna stay quietly as we are listening to John. Okay, and then after that, we'll bring you back to the discussion very soon. So, and I'm gonna share my screen. And now we can see the screen, John. And then just whenever you want, just say next, and then I would move the slide for you.
Yeah. Okay, so good day to everybody. I don't know it's morning or evening or afternoon. And namaste to all of you. In the times of COVID, no shake hands, no hugs. So this is the Indian namaste. And it's an honor to be on this webinar. And thank you, Ratana, for inviting me. And I also am happy to be with an excellent set of panelists, most of whom I know very well. And once again, to all the viewers, I hope you enjoy this webinar and learn a little bit from it and contribute also to it as it goes along. I have the task of talking about India. Ratana, next. Can you change the slide, Ratana? Yeah, okay. Anyway.
It's supposed to work. It's supposed to work, John, but
it doesn't, is it?
There you go.
Okay. So I just wanted to contextualize, because India is a very, very big country, and I am speaking from the state of Kerala. So if you can see where it is at the southwestern end of India, and I'm speaking right from the southern tip of this state, from the capital. So you see, India is a vast continent, and not to speak about the country as a whole, but even when you talk about the fishers, the marine fishers are spread across 9 maritime states, and each of these states has its own language. So there is no common language that you can speak to the fishers. They belong to all the possible religions that we have, Hinduism and Christianity and Islam. At least these three form the majority, and they are spread out across this 6,000 kilometer of the mainland coastline. There are about it is estimated that there are about 4 million fish workers, and this means the settlement pattern is very dispersed. There are about 3,500 fishing villages, and the landing centers are also quite large. This makes the fishing a very dispersed activity. So if you just walk along the coast, practically in some states, every second kilometer, you will come across a fishing village. So if the fishermen of India come out onto their coastline and stretch out their hands, they can form a human chain across the whole country without any problem. So this is just to give you an idea of the context of India. And to get to the topic, I would just say that as an introduction, that there are huge amounts of risks and vulnerabilities which fishers in India face. And so it's not unusual. I think everywhere in the world, you find that fishers face far more vulnerabilities than mainland agriculturists and so on. I mean, and just to briefly put you in the context of today, I was thinking about this and I find that there are 4 C's, which today, the letter C, which accounts for much of the risks and vulnerabilities which small-scale fishers are facing today. The first, of course, today is the COVID situation, which has upset completely their lives, and we will get into that. The second is things like cyclones. We just had a major one, which also affected Mahmoud, Bangladesh, and Myanmar. So that's the second C. The third is there is a huge coastal squeeze from the land. Lots of industries, tourism, everybody other than fisheries is taking over the coast. So there is this coastal squeeze which is taking place. And then you have this new trend towards coastal conservation, which is also squeezing fishers from the side of the sea. So with 4 C's, it's difficult to manage your life and livelihood. And that is the larger context in which Indian small-scale fisheries is faced. And just a word about what I am doing. I have been working with small-scale fishers from the early 1970s. I guess most of you who are watching this were probably not born then. I walked into a village and I lived there for 4 years organizing cooperatives for fishermen. And then I went in to do research. So I've always been walking on 2 legs, so to speak, research and action. And I've worked in a few other countries too. So I have a fairly reasonably good understanding of small scale fisheries around the world. And I am very hopeful that if we negotiate the future well, then there is a great future for small scale fisheries in spite of all these risks and vulnerabilities that they face today. So I'll stop with that introductory note and come back to you later. Thank you.
Thank you, John, for that. You want me to flip through the slide and see what the other pictures that we wanted to show?
Yeah, just probably those initial pictures, just to give you a glimpse. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. She's just go back. She's probably the only woman fisher, the one before that. She goes out very deep into the sea also. So, she's breaking the male bastion. Yeah.
So that's very not very common to see that, I suppose.
Yeah, it is not very common. Yeah.
But this one, like a diver.
They are, they dive for seagrass. Yeah. She's selling fish. Yes. Okay. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
All right. Oh,
Thank you.
okay.
No, you needn't show that. We'll come to that later.
We'll come to that later. Thank
Yeah.
you. Now, let me see. So, Yin, you wanted to go next? Now, we can decide not to see the screen, and because we don't really need that for now, and I could just be there with you. How about that? Okay. So that means that you don't feel like you need to talk on your own, right? So I'm around, but please go. Mm-hmm.
Hi everyone, my name is Sinain. I'm from Myanmar and I'm working for the small scale fishing community for previous 11 years. My work is mainly on policy advocacy work and the strengthening the small scale institution around the coastal area. So I have a regular contacts and work with the small scale fishing community in Myanmar. So small scale fishing community, it is quite difficult to define what is small scale fishery in Myanmar. Like for example, if you talk about the inland fishery areas, small scale fishery may be sort of like a subsistence fisher working for their family consumptions. This can be included in a small scale fishery, but like a store net fishing in an inland fishery, it could be kind of like a big scale fishery in an inland fishery. But in a coastal fishery, it could be, we call in coastal fishery in Myanmar, we call this is sort of like a small scale fisheries in other coastal area like in Mon and Tanindai. So small scale fishery in the meaning is already diverse in Myanmar, and also the vulnerability in a small scale fishing community is also very diverse in Myanmar conditions. So the key challenge for the small-scale fishery in inland fishery is licensing problems. Since the British colonial times until now, the small-scale fisher have to buy a license from the government through the auction process. This is very high price, and this make the sort of like economic vulnerability for the small-scale fishing community, and also it make them more and more indebtedness for the community. So this is one vulnerability context for the small-scale fishing community. And if we talk about the coastal and the marine fisheries, so small-scale fishery is only related with the liver work, and the fish worker issues are always come up, like slave like fisheries in raw fishing. So these are also very in this day in Myanmar, it is very highlight for everyone. So people are staying outside the sea for like 9 months. Then there is no equipment, there is no communications. They are not allowed to communicate to their family during 9 months. Nobody know how many people are disappear outside the seas. There is no registration system, sort of things. These are the small-scale fishery in the marine fishery sector. I will, and also there's a lot of the children liver involved in a small-scale fishery in a marine fishery sector. I will talk about that later on, and linking with the COVID-19 impacts. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Yin. And again, I have to say we don't hear much about the situation in Myanmar, but so it's really, really great that you are here to share with us, the situation. And so I'm sure we would learn more about it as we move into the discussion. So let me now invite Julius to see whether it's gonna work or not. And you do have a presentation, Julius? So doesn't look very good at the moment. So why don't we move on to Mahmoud for now, and then let's hope we can get you back. Okay, just wanted to Mahmoud. Okay, very good. Hi, Mahmoud. Okay, so I'm gonna stay with you because I never like it when people seem to be on their own there. So I'm gonna mute my mic and let you make the introductory remark. Thank you.
Hello, everybody, and welcome. Thank you for watching this very important webinar. I am Mahmoud Islam. I am working as an assistant professor at Sylhet in the Department of Coastal and Marine Fisheries at Sylhet Agriculture University in Bangladesh. Though Sylhet is a bit far from the coast, but I have a strong fascination and my research and training background also in marine science. So we are always working on the livelihood of coastal fishers in Bangladesh. In Bangladesh, small-scale fishery sector is very big actually. Around 17 million people in Bangladesh are employed in fishery sectors, of which 1.4 million people are women. While the employability of small-scale fisheries is very significant, just after agriculture, the sector yet to receive fair and just attention from policymakers, considering the role they play for economic prosperity and social development. Actually, my research mainly focused on the Sundarban regions, which is the West Bengal state of Bangladesh. And they have, I'm working in the Sundarban for last 10 years. During my PhD also focus as part in the Sundarban region, the small-scale fishers. And the fishers in the Sundarbans, they face multiple challenges that come from a broad array of complex environmental, economic, political pressure and changes that make them more vulnerable. The issues are more common with India and Myanmar, of course, and we share many common vulnerabilities which our fishers from our neighboring countries also, like Professor John and my colleague from Myanmar, elaborate some of the shared aspects from the vulnerability of small-scale fishers. And while particularly the vulnerability of small-scale fishers became more evident during two events, which is this cyclone Amphan, which struck on the coast of India and Bangladesh, and also this COVID-19, which this pandemic impacting everyone in the world, and small-scale fishers is likely to be. So in my talk in this session, I will discuss two small case studies about these two different phases of which the small-scale fishers in Bangladesh are currently facing. And thank you. And
Thank you for that introductory remark, Mahmoud. So I'm sure we're going to be hearing more about the details in a little while. I'm now going to see whether Julius can do this or not. Hi.
Hi.
Okay.
Sorry, I got disconnected. Good morning, everyone.
Right. You might not, why don't you it might work better not to use a PowerPoint.
Yeah, sure.
But so I just let you speak for, a few minutes.
Okay. So, before I proceed, I would like to thank and congratulate Too Big to Ignore and its partners for organizing such an event, and of course for the opportunity to share how small-scale Filipino fishers address and cope up with risk and vulnerability. That means that greatly affects their livelihoods and surrounding environment, especially this time of COVID-19. I think Ratana, it would be best to if I can share my slide. I think it's working now. Yeah, that's it. Thank you. It comprises of around 7,641 islands, waters. So the waters, which is 7 times bigger than the land area, which is only just around 29.8 million hectares. So the Philippine fishery is very important locally and globally. The country is the seventh largest fishing nation in the world, And in 2017, the Philippines ranked number 9 among the top producing fisheries countries in the world. And small-scale fisheries plays a bigger role because 47% of the fish caught in the Philippines are by nearshore fishers. Fishing pressure, unfortunately, is still very high as there is an increase in the number of fishers. In 2012, there were only documented around 1.6 million fishers, but now it rose up to around 2 million. Also, the number of fishing vessels have also increased, and fishing gears are sometimes modified, becoming more efficient, apart from the incidences of illegal and destructive fishing. So the high dependence of Filipinos in our seas for food and livelihood brought about by open access have resulted to overfishing and is worsened by the deteriorating state of our coastal and marine habitats. So in 2014, we introduced a program called Fish Forever together with RARE to help address the problem of overfishing and in support of the various efforts of both government and other groups to ensure sustainable fisheries, biodiversity conservation, and address climate change. So it has been implemented in more than 50 coastal municipalities in the Philippines, and the program enables coastal communities to actively participate in fisheries management. So at RARE, with the Fish Forever program, we train local site implementing teams to address challenges in overfishing and in ecosystem degradation through a participatory process that establishes well-managed network of marine reserves and managed access areas, supported by behavior adoption strategies, policy reform, and financial resilience approaches. So we hope that with the improvement in marine governance, municipal fishers, small-scale fishers, and local stakeholders become more effective in their capacity to secure their food and livelihood and to become more resilient, especially with the impacts of climate change. So together with partners from government agencies like the Department of Environment and Natural Resources, as well as with the Bureau of Fisheries and Aquatic Resources, together as well as provincial governments. So Fish Forever is being implemented following a roadmap. So as you can see on your screen, based on the theory of cooperative behavior, while the strategies and activities uses a behavior design process. So as you can see all throughout the phases of Fish Forever, a behavior adoption is integrated. So in our current sites, we started with startup activities such as profiling, as well as baseline assessments, including vulnerability assessments, and these are also mostly completed. And results and as well as relevant information were already utilized by communities to better understand the fisheries landscape and existing conditions. Prior to COVID-19, Fish Forever sites were already in the stage wherein communities and partners were already engaged, and the program has secured the buy-in of key stakeholders. While in some sites, which are advanced sites, they are now in the stage of moving towards setting up of systems for effective coastal and fisheries resource management. So these are the photos. You can see some of the community engagement activities that we do. So using fish cards, we use a lot of toolkits in RARE and the Fish Forever program. We also make use of the mascot. Here we can see Profi, the professional fisher that goes around communities, especially when there are events, to bring the message more effectively to our partner fishers. So by March, by January of this year, the first case of COVID-19 was reported in the country, and in succeeding weeks there were like a steady increase of individuals affected by the virus. So it was only in mid-March that the national government started to implement community quarantines to avoid the spread of the disease. And with the issuance of these policies, many communities were adversely affected as movements were restricted and the conduct of activities were barred, including the small-scale fishery sector. So there was, at the start of the quarantine period, there was part of the policy was restricting all the fishing activities, and guidelines for allowing farming and fishing were just issued by late of that month. So other affected industries such as tourism and local transport also had impacted fisheries, as many workers from these sectors, mostly the daily wage earners, are resorted to fishing. So meaning there were an influx of new fishers, especially in municipal waters. There was also a disruption of supply chain, which I think also other countries also experienced. And there were challenges in logistics involving the movement of food and provision of government guidelines impede fishers' access to markets, thus curbing their productive capacities and hindering them to sell their produce. Another major concern during the quarantine period is that there was also an observation of the increase in municipal fisheries violations, mostly intrusion inside marine protected areas, particularly in the no-take zones. And because some fishers took advantage of the situation, since there was a shift in enforcement efforts, since most of the enforcement efforts are land-based movements. Looking at the bright spots, so last week the Philippine government issued new set of guidelines, while most of the coastal municipalities were classified under moderate to low risk. So, but still, local government remain cautious about the resumption of many activities and continue to enforce localized policies incorporating minimum health requirements such as the use of face masks and maintaining physical distancing. There's also a positive sign or positive outcome of the pandemic because there was also an increased awareness in terms of improving fishing practices. So there are fishing groups that demand for the government to sanitize their fishing boats, fish landing areas, as well as wet markets. There were also incidences of acts of conservation by fishers, like reporting stranded marine mammals and turtles, and some fisher folks were also assigned to border or to patrol their borders to monitor movement and activities at sea. So the uncertainty of not being able to have income through fishing and provide food for family sometimes result for the person to resort to illegal activities. So case is true especially for fishers. So this is sometimes worsened as fisher folks were not prioritized in terms of receiving assistance and support coming from the national government. So it is very important that during the quarantine period, we at Rare and Fish Forever try to raise their morale, and people have started to recognize the important role of small-scale fishers in the society and in their contribution to food security. So part of it is Fish Forever developing a database system that proved helpful for LGUs to validate and ensure registered fishers in the locality were prioritized, especially in the provision of government assistance such as financial assistance and food. So inserting to food packs to fishers remind them how grateful the community is to them, and at the same time reinforces the behavior adoption, as it also reminds them to continue with their responsibilities. During the program, we are also formulating our re-entry plan and looking at blended learning opportunities to keep engaging partners and target audiences. And we are now identifying ways to maximize local resources and channels to bring the program to the fishing communities while being physically distant. So in closing, we all know that overfishing is a complex problem that imply great risk to our small-scale fishers, while the spread of COVID-19 and its ensuing factors added another layer to their vulnerable state. While we continue to address these issues, we recognize that adapting and conforming to positive behavior, be it in their fishing practice or in upholding their health and overall well-being, proved to be effective in reducing risk and managing their vulnerability. So I hope the audience have learned something from this presentation. And in behalf of the Filipino fishers throughout the country, we join the whole world in celebrating World Oceans Day. So towards a healthy seas and abundant fisheries. Thank you and good morning.
Thank you very much. that. So a lot of information, but that's good background for us. So thank you for sharing that. We're going to move now to our next panelist. That would be Susana, and I would like to invite Susana to speak about the first round in terms of what you've been doing and from your perspective, please.
Thank you very much, Ratana. Let me start by saying that I am one of two fishery officers at the FAO Regional Office for Asia and the Pacific here in Bangkok, and there will soon be three of us, so that's good news. I would like to provide you some examples of what we are doing here. Firstly, we provide technical support to the projects that our country offices are implementing. And relevant to the topic that we have now are two projects on climate change adaptation in fisheries and aquaculture. One that is ongoing in Myanmar and another one that is just starting in Bangladesh. Related to that is our projects. We are also providing technical support to projects that are funded by our FAO Technical Cooperation Program. And again, related to this topic is the project on reducing food loss in the capture fisheries supply chain in Bangladesh. Now, in addition to, while we are providing technical support to implementation, we are also providing technical support to the development of new projects on climate change adaptation in fisheries and aquaculture. And we just completed one and submitted one to Jeff for Cambodia. And another one is being developed for Timor-Leste. So the third example of what we do is we provide secretariat support to the Asia Pacific Fishery Commission, which is the oldest regional fishery body. It has 21 members. And every 2 years, we have a meeting of the member countries. We also have what we call a regional consultative forum meeting, back-to-back with the Asia Pacific Fishery Commission. And one of the agenda items that is discussed is on small-scale fisheries guidelines or small-scale fisheries in general. We would have organized the session this year in March, but because of COVID-19, the host government and FAO have agreed to move it for 2021. A fourth example of what we do is to organize studies and workshops on topics of emerging issues in fisheries and aquaculture. And here I would like to mention the regional consultation that we co-organized with the Network of Aquaculture Centers in Asia Pacific last year on demographic change in fishing communities. And the participants shared the potential impacts of characteristics such as aging of fishers, as well as migration within the country, migration of youth to the rural areas, and how these aspects could potentially affect the fishing industry. How it could potentially affect livelihoods diversification, climate change adaptation, and gender roles and relations. Now, with reference to COVID-19, we are soon to release an information brief on the impacts of COVID-19 on fisheries and aquaculture, but you will be hearing more about this during this panel and also in the one that was held last Monday. So let me stop there, and I am looking forward to a fruitful and lively discussion. Over to you, Ratana. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Susana. It's very encouraging to hear that there's so many things happening in the region with the effort of FAO Regional Office and what you have been doing. They're really covering many important topics here. I'm trying to bring back our speakers, but I don't see them with the camera on. So Mahmoud and John, that's great. Thank you. Okay, so you haven't gone to sleep or anything yet. Let me see. There we have everyone. Okay, so lots of things, lots of things. I mean, number one, there's so many small scale fisheries in the region, right? And that's exactly when John started with saying that, you know, you hold hands and let's cover every single space. And you can kind of see that every time you think about small scale fisheries, you want to think about that kind of a lot of them out there. And then, you know, they like that's why we call them too big to ignore, right? And we also say that they are too important to fail. And the second part is really about the fact that there's so many of them, and not all of them are, you know, many of them are facing this kind of you know, vulnerability, and they are also exposed to a lot of kind of risk coming from various places. And even if we have a lot of organizations like RARE, like FAO, and others are trying to support and help, there are still a lot of issues that the small scale fisheries in the region need to deal with. And now that things, the situation, you know, in for the most part in many of these countries are not too good to start with, and things have become a lot worse in some cases, in many cases, because of COVID-19. There might be some opportunities, there might be something that you can see like bright spots, or, you know, something that we could, you know, feel good about. But for the most part, they are very, you know, situation is very serious, right? So I think I wanted to, you know, invite you to speak a little bit more specific about that, you know, whether you feel that the risk and vulnerability of small scale fisheries in the region really is really a lot worse now because of the COVID-19, and whether you have seen any kind of responses, you know, impacts and responses that you kind of like to share in terms of these are some of the things that we're doing well to address the situation. But there are still, you know, a lot of challenges, of course. Now, I'm just going to pause quickly to speak to our audience. I know that people have been saying hello, even though you're not saying where you're from. I know where you're from because I know you. So this is Riel from, well, he's from Bangladesh, but he's sitting in St. John. So saying hello from next door. We have Yinji saying hello from Japan. And welcome, you know, all of you to the program. And I suppose I'm now going to guess, and I would guess that Angela might be saying hello from the Philippines. I'm not sure somebody you know or not, Julius, and perhaps Marian also saying hello from the Philippines. All right. So if you have any questions, just type it in the chat box so that then we'll bring the questions to the screen as you just saw, and that way we can engage with you as well. Okay. So anybody would like to speak to that question and have about whether you are seeing the situation a lot worse than before, given the COVID-19 and COVID-19, and then you can add the other C, which is a cyclone, and you know, to start with. Don't forget to turn on your mute, unmute your mic, please, when you speak. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, I just you know, want to point out a big kind of contradiction when we talk about small scale fisheries. You see, I fully agree that they are too big to ignore. But you just look at the numbers that we've been listening to. I mean, in Bangladesh, in India, in Philippines, in Myanmar, there are millions of small-scale fisheries. But yet, when you look at it from the national perspective, they are insignificant. And they do not feature anywhere in the center of the perspectives of development and planning and so on. So while we aggregate them and show them at the national level, it is still not significant for most of the Asian countries. You know, even in a place like Philippines, where it's an island, an archipelago, and you have fishers in every island, at the national level, they are largely ignored. You know, I would say the same thing, for example, in a country like Cambodia. Everybody eats fish morning, noon, and night. But at the national level, you will not find anything about fisheries in the planning in documents, anything significant. But the place where small scale fisheries really matter is at the lowest level of governance. So in Philippines, in the barangay, in India, in the panchayat, in Myanmar, what is it, communal? The since I've been there, I know that it's at the local level. So at the local level, that is where small scale fisheries really matters. It matters for the economy, it matters for employment, it matters for food, it matters for, you name it, it matters for tourism, anything at that local level. Small scale fishery is very important. So we need to focus much more on making changes at that local lowest level of governance. And we need to start from there, because that is where the politicians, the activists, everybody, for everyone, small scale fisheries is important. For the politician, it's important because there are so many small scale fishers, and if he wants to be voted into power, he has to befriend them, you see. But as you move higher, they lose relevance. So, I mean, this is one message I want to put across, that whatever we are tackling, whether it is COVID, whether it is the impact of cyclones, whether it is the coastal squeeze that we are facing in all our countries, and some of the conservation measures, I'm not talking about all the conservation measures, but some of the conservation measures which are taking away the space that is available to small scale fishers at the local levels. I mean, these things can have to be tackled first at the lowest level of governance. So, I mean, I just want to throw that out to
I think that's a very important point, and I guess I think we already have comments from Yinji in that kind of along that same line, speaking about the roles of the organizations, local level organizations. So we could really come back to that point as well about local governance comes in so many various forms. And if we can build and strengthen that local organizations, the chance that the significance and importance of small-scale fisheries would be really appreciated, and also we can really support small-scale fisheries at that level would be great. But I guess the question that we might want to think about, especially now, I mean, when we talk about the COVID situation, governments make decisions on funding, and they're going to be facing financial situation, budget consideration that might mean that they might not be able to throw money at everybody, and therefore there'll be some priorities that have to be made. So I guess we need to recognize too that unless we get the national level to listen to, and then we don't have the strong local governance, and there's how is it going to work? So I'd like to return to that discussion eventually. Okay, so let me hear from whether anybody else has any like any point to make about along the line that John, whether it's in response to what John is saying, or other kind of observation that you're making about how the COVID-19 situation is impacting small-scale fisheries in your location. Susana, please.
Thank you very much, Ratana. I would like to, for us to take a step back and imagine the fishing community before COVID-19. And these are a kind of the pre-existing situation, such as lack of access to to water, for example, lack of access to health, lack of access to social protection. So I would say that with COVID-19, we are being asked to have sanitation, hygiene, wash our hands. And so what it means for fishing communities without access to water, and then the fear that they might have COVID-19 without even having access to health or insurance and to social protection. So I would say that based on what we are seeing in the news and what our colleagues are telling us, about the impact of COVID-19, it has worsened the situation for fishing communities, especially those in remote areas. Over to you.
Yeah, no, that's a very important point. So that's pre-existing conditions really are impediment in many ways to be able to deal with the requirements that we need to be able to do with sanitation and other. So not only the health alone, but also other social kind of issues and ramification that we could expect out of that as well. So how have they been coping? Maybe Yin or Mahmoud, or how have they been coping against the small scale fishing people in your countries? Do you have any information that you can share with us? Go ahead, Yin.
Hi. So for the COVID-19 is in Myanmar, like the first positive patients identified in March 24. But for the fishery related market is let's say tie-ins starting from February, because most of the export markets are closed, especially Chinese market is closed, and so most of the small scale fisher, they can sell their fish to the profitable market starting from February. So especially the export company, they have full of stock in their storage, and they cannot spend it, so they don't buy fish from small scale fisher anymore. So small scale fisher, they arrange with the local fish collector and to sell in the local market. That's the arrangement they are currently doing for their livelihood. But the problem is, of course, when I interview with the coastal fisher from Mon State, they said they got around 1/3 of the price they can normally get from the normal market. So their income is largely reduced. So, and also for the Delta community, this time is also very normally in before Tianjin, like it's Songkran in Thailand. So Tianjin is the peak season for them to get a lot of money for the whole season, especially for the to get a fishing license for next year or something like they end in March and April for their main income to get to pay for the license fee for next year. But March and April, the market is totally collapsed. So now in fish collector, they only buy in with a floor price for the fish, like for example, Hilsa. Normally the Hilsa price is like depends on the size and weights. If they get a bigger fish, they can have a better price. But now they have to sell in a very floor price, and so some area they said around they can only earn like 1/3 of the normal income. Some area they said 1/4, something like so. Now is the government start selling the fishing license for starting from May, so they don't have money for paying for the license, and so they start borrowing money from the private money lender. So in this 2 months, let's say in this COVID period, indebtedness level of the small scale fishing community is significantly increased.
Okay, thank you, Mahmoud. What about in Bangladesh? How have they been coping with the situation?
Well, in Bangladesh, like several sectors are badly affected, which has a strong market connection in abroad. But the small scale fishers who are go for daily fishing, or they are not in much focus about the government intervention. So the news just appears which has a market connection to foreign market or local market. There are some report in newspaper about how they are affected. Like export-oriented crab fishery in the Sundarbans, they have a big market in China. Like 85% live crab in the Sundarban region, they destined for China, and this sector become hard hit because the New Year, Chinese New Year, it has a great demand for live crab. But now there is no demand from China, and China ban export from Bangladesh. So these people, like 500,000 people who are involved in crab culture and also fisheries, because crab is also collected from nature, then it's door rearing in the pond. So like altogether 500,000 people are involved in this fishery. So there are some report about that they are badly affected by this COVID. And also like this dry fish industry in Cox's Bazar region, because they don't have raw fish input from the sea. So those people who are involved in dry fish fisheries, like 30,000 people, and two-thirds of them are women. So they now lost their job. So there are some talk about them in newspaper or some reports. And also like different sectors, which is like garment sectors, they are asking for incentive and compensation, and government is taking care of them. And like eco industry, they are also asking for compensation or incentive from the government. So they have some buoys, but no buoys from the small scale fishers who depend for like daily fishing for their income and food. There is not so much talk about them, how they would survive. Even if like the total agriculture sectors, those people who are involved in agriculture sectors, they have much less voice about like price negotiation. But government is this time is careful that we have agriculture sectors like paddy could be harvested, so that we can ensure food security. But there is no voice that fish is also a part of food security. So no discussion about that. So just rice is okay, like this way. So how do small scale fishers survive? Maybe like it's maybe pertinent to discuss on thing rather than helping them to survive this situation. The Bay of Bengal, now there is a 2-month ban for no fishing. So those small scale fishers are now affected by this double crisis, like this pandemic and no fishing in the Bay of Bengal. Like 15,000 fishers from Technap, I just read the report that they submit a petition to the government that they should be excused for not to fishing in the bay. They ask for to allow them to fishing in the bay. So how the small scale fishers will survive? Maybe just they are doing illegal fishing. And uh, and also one positive thing like that, if they could manage fishing in the bay, and they have market like local market people at the rural level. This lockdown or it's not so much enforced, people have to go to market to buy fish and other necessary things. So in that way, they may, if they could go to fishing to the river or sea, and they have this marketing channel at least somewhat survived. So in this way, they can maintain their livelihood as long as they could do fishing in the water. So and this way they just but those sectors which has like a market in abroad or foreign market, they just affected badly by this pandemic.
Mhm. Yeah, I guess we can spend a lot of time just talking about the situation and then, looking at assessing impacts and etc. But there must be a way to respond to this, right? And we have seen quite, a range of possibilities here. But I think I just wanted to return to this question about, strengthening of that local organizations, perhaps through, cooperatives or other fish organizations. Maybe, John, would you like to just start with that in terms of what's your idea in terms of what's the role that these organizations can play to help small-scale fishing people cope with the situation?
Yes, I mean, I started my life organizing fisher cooperatives, so I am a great believer in the role that cooperatives play. And during the time of COVID, it is the cooperatives in my home state, at least in a few places, which took up this challenge. And fishing was banned, but small scale fishing was permitted. But they would not permit buyers to involve in auctioning because that would create crowding. Uh, uh, you know, uh, Transportation was restricted because movement was restricted. So you had a peculiar situation, and the cooperatives came in on this. And for example, they formed committees, multi-stakeholder committees, and decided that, okay, people need fish. There is some fish which is being caught. We cannot have auction. So let us have a negotiated price. So, if Ratana, if you can put up that slide which you have there. So prices were listed, and they were the next slide. Yeah. So you see on the beach, the prices were listed, and things were sold for fixed price. But this price would be negotiated, say, once a week between the traders, between the women, and the fishers. So the big advantage was that when prices were fixed, then fishers didn't have to compete with each other. Any time of the day when they came, they got the same price. So this meant the race for fish reduced. This meant the consumption of fuel reduced, and all the impacts of that. This meant the resource was in any case being fished much more sustainably. So just one intervention of the cooperative. Can you go to the next slide? Yeah. You see, so organizations are important. So on the beach, they have made all these barriers. The buyers will sit inside. The fish is displayed, and they decide to take the fish. It is billed, and everybody is happy. Of course, one of the important reasons was that the demand for fish was very high in my state. We are great fish eaters. So the big advantage of this situation went to fishers. So now they are saying, well, this looks like a good situation. Why don't we organize negotiated prices even in normal times? And why don't we have a rule which says that the fisher, the first price, should be decided by negotiation on a weekly basis or whatever? So I think one of the good aspects which has come out of this COVID situation, because of the intervention of local level cooperatives. You see, this cannot be done by the national government or anybody else. It has to be done by the initiative of a collective organization at the local level. And this is what has been shown to become effective. Now, in normal times, you could never have created such a situation. So I think this is in one sense, a kind of blessing of COVID, is that maybe we are moving to something which is good for the fishers, it's good for the consumer, because you see the shore price is informed to everybody. So the consumer also knows what the fisherman is getting, and he can always decide that he will not be fleeced by the fish seller. So because of the flow of information, because of this negotiation, I think it's good for the fish economy. You use less fuel, you have less competition, you create a more sustainable fishing, because you use more sustainable nets, because you 20 people cannot go on a boat. This would be against COVID practice. So the boats are smaller. So we are somehow getting back to small scale fishery as being a viable proposition. Yeah, I'll stop with that.
That's really great. Thank you so much, John, for that. So, I mean, I think that's what we're going to have to start thinking more about, right? I mean, we have to be able to find opportunities somehow among these crises, and somehow being able to draw on the kind of strengths, local strengths from the organizations would be good. So, eventually, I would love to hear further. Kind of like your thought in terms of how to build or how to strengthen organization if they don't have it yet. So, or maybe Julius has something to add to that. How to really build and strengthen organization at a local level so that they become very effective. Okay, Julius?
Yeah, just sort of like an addition to what John said earlier. I think in the Philippines, local organization and fisher folk groups have been very beneficial, especially during the quarantine period. In fairness to the government, especially those that organizations that have been accredited by the local governments, it's been good that fishers have been organized since there was a program by the local government and supported by the national government that the local government will buy all their produce. So, like instead of the individual fishers selling individually to the market, so the local organizations consolidate, like their leaders will consolidate all of the individual catch. Then the national and the local government will buy it from them. So they go around the municipality and they have this what we call like kadiwa, like like uh, like a wet market. So they sell all the catch there. So it's good because it's through the organization and not individually. And if you can also see show slide number 6 of my presentation, Ratana. Some of the fishers in our sites form savings clubs or what we call the village savings and loan associations. So this has been very effective in especially coping with individual risk and vulnerabilities, especially like some of the members have sickness, not necessarily COVID, but they were like benefited from the social funds that each of the members are saving. So they have been doing this, and like some of the members have this funds, fishers funds that they brought some food packs and share it with some of the frontliners. So it's a good thing that's happening in some of the sites. So hopefully we're doing this to be replicated in some of the areas as well.
Right. Thank you for that. I guess, Susana, I mean, maybe you did mention that you organize studies and topics on, consultation and stuff. Is this some of the things that you're planning to do in the region to do a little bit more, building local capacity to cope with the situation and to reduce the vulnerability? There's actually some kind of a question also about how women, especially fish traders, processors, might be affected. And that's some research that you've been doing on gender. So maybe you can speak to that a little bit, Susana.
Thank you very much. And I would like to acknowledge Angela. Angela Lentisco is actually from Spain, but she is based here in Bangkok. Okay. And she's working with us. Yes, yes. Her family name sounds Filipino, but yeah, she's from Spain. So yeah, I would like to add this gender dimension, and the example that John mentioned is really very inspiring. But if we look at the supply chain, so we have the fishers, we have the processing and fish traders, and what we hear, for example, from the example that also Julius mentioned, is the government is buying the produce of the small scale fishers. So we don't see much coming out about what about our women who are involved in processing and involved in marketing. So if the buyer seller relationship has been broken or is being facilitated by other actors, there is a kind of a negative effect on the women who should be also in this supply chain. But I see from what John mentioned that they are included in this if they are organized. So I believe also what John has said, that organization is key post-COVID, and even even in the past it was key, even now and post-COVID. So they have to be the collective action of the women involved in fish trading and in processing would be also key post-COVID. And what we are seeing, for example, about online platforms where fishers can sell directly to the consumers is good because they get a good price. On the other hand, there is also this effect on women fishers. And so for me, I believe what John mentioned about also organizing collectively and collective action of at each stage of the supply chain, so that these different stages could negotiate with each other. But of course, it will take a lot of capacity development on the ground, also on developing leadership capacity of women in these organizations. Over
Right.
to you.
Very nice. Thank you for that point. Mahmoud, you also have been looking at, the situation from the women perspective. Maybe you can also share, because my understanding of Bangladesh is that, well, you can speak a little bit about whether the level of organization of either fishers or women involving in fisheries. You can just share with us a little bit about the situation there. That'd be great.
Okay, thank you very much. As I said in my previous part, that women are also affected badly by this pandemic. And like global audience in Bangladesh, women are also involved in and processing, and section of women involved in collection of and this juvenile crab and fish and the post larvae of shrimp and prawn, which used for aquaculture, and it's a very big source of employment for particularly the rural women. The people, the total workforce involved in this collection of shrimp and prawn fry, about 80% are women and child labor. So if this pandemic continue for longer period, then the demand for export-oriented this shrimp and prawn will be decreased, and so those people who are involved in this farming, either they will negotiate like a price drop in this shrimp prawn larvae, or totally stop buying from these poor fisher women. So in this way, they will be badly affected, and many those fisher women are just depends for their daily income to subsidize their livelihood. So this is a big risk for rural coastal women. And also I previously mentioned about that this also this shrimp processing industry, like there are quite a good number of women involved in this processing industry also. So if this export came to a halt for longer period, they will likely to lose their jobs. So in that way, women will be like maybe in some households, the women are the main breadwinner for their whole family. So they like to suffer a lot in case of this pandemic. And in case of these cooperative organizations, I don't have much idea about it, but so far I know it's not very much developed in Bangladesh. There are like fishers organizations in every level, but it's mostly dysfunctional. And what is unfortunate is that like many official, like holder or bearer of these fishers organizations are like non-fisher local elite. So they don't raise their voice much in support of the small scale fishers. So government has some policy to like lease water body to fishers organizations. So these are very lucrative deals. So some non-fishers, rural elite just enter into this fishers organization to capture these benefits. So who are the like real fishermen? They actually don't get benefits of this fishers organizations in Bangladesh at I could say in broader scale.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, so I mean, I guess we could agree that if we are able to organize, then we could have a much better opportunity to either even, become resilient or have a little bit of opportunities, be able to capture some of the new opportunities that the COVID-19 might bring. So maybe it's something that we can hear more about. I love to pick more from John here in terms of these kind of community organization, right? How to really mobilize, how to really find where's the leadership, how to build that capacity that would be required, and then achieve that, really creating impact at the local level and achieve the goal that we like to see. What can you tell us about this, John?
Me? Oh, okay. Well, I don't want to monopolize the discussion, but very quickly, I want to say that.
I'm not making this up, right? Because there is a question coming in. Still, people are still very curious about that. It sounds like, it needs many elements, many ingredients, right?
Yes.
And so if we need to
Yes.
talk a little bit more. Mm-hmm.
Yes, you see, I know this. It's very easier to organize farmers, milk producers, and so on. Very difficult to organize fishers. And I can tell you that from experience. But it is only in situations like what we have now that you can really show what are the potentials, what are the opportunities for coming together. Now, for example, you see, small scale fisheries can be shown to be safe fishing, both for people and for the resource. So, this is something we have to emphasize. That, if you want to maintain social distancing and so on, you can't do it on a trawler with 30 people, on this little space that we have, the kind of thing. So we have to get rid of some of these useless, hopeless, destructive technologies and go back to small scale fishery. So once they see that opportunity, then there is a greater motivation for coming together. The same thing as I said with prices, So we have to, as they say in English, strike while the iron is hot, or something like that. Yeah. So the moment is important, and if you look at any successful cooperative, you go back to their history. It is a moment in their history which created them. Of course,
So
there are many which have been organized by governments and so on, but these are just institutions which are basically empty shell. There is nothing inside it. So, but those organizations where there is something substantive, it is because they were formed at a particular moment in history. It may be something in the village. It may be something at a national level. It may be a disaster. But you see, we now have a situation where everywhere we have the same issue. So this is a great moment for Asia to move ahead. And I would quickly say that, if you just take the guidelines, there are four chapters in the guidelines which can be emphasized here. One is the issue of tenure and management. Very important. This is the time to talk about that. Social development, as Susana said, this is the time. We have to improve the health conditions, the literacy. This is the moment to do that. So social development, and particularly with the emphasis on women. This is very important. And then the value chain issue. I would just start with the question of, how do you fix prices? This is the biggest problem in fishery, that you cannot fix prices very easily. So if fishermen are now convinced that there is some meaning in having negotiated fixed prices, then we can move to this. I just want to point out that if you know the history of Norway,
mm-hmm.
you see, the Norwegian fishers, way back in 1930, they demanded such things, and the government decided that they would have the right of the first sale. The fishers would have the right to decide the first sale price, which is negotiated with the merchants. So a fisher association negotiates with the merchant association, and they fix the prices. So immediately it gets rid of a lot of the problems that take place in the open access issues, the competition in the sea, and so on. So this is very crucial. So the value chain dimensions in the guidelines is important. And finally, the issue of capacity building. This is very important. Collective action does not just happen, it has to be facilitated. And there are so many people, I mean, all of us, and so many hundreds of great activists in Asia. This is the moment for them to facilitate collective action by building capacity for men and women in the fishing community. And here the role of the youth in the community is very important. I would stress that. And sometimes some of these new things that are happening, I mean, sales over the internet and all the other modern things, use of smartphone, etc. This is attracting a lot of the youth back into fishing related activities. And I think that's a great trend of the time. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you so much, John. So, fortunately, you can see small-scale fisheries as solution as opposed to as a problem. So this is the point that I think I really like, that emphasis in terms of there's an opportunity here, and the only sector that can do this safely and can still provide and then lead to sustainability is a small-scale fishery. So we just need to reorganize as well, and the thinking within the government about that, because there are other even more powerful actors and sectors who would argue for, right, that this should be their moment. But what I'm hearing from you is that this should be the moment for the small-scale fisheries. So I really started to see that instead of the 4 C's that you're talking before, I see a very positive 4 C's that would be about cooperative, cooperation, collective action, capacity, and community. So I think we really can move ahead with this. So John has written a beautiful piece on this in the newspaper, so we can add that to the library for the resources, as a resource for us to think about. It's so positive, and I kind of want to invite now this in the final round, right, to really leave some really positive notes in terms of, if we do this, we can really put small-scale fisheries ahead and secure future sustainable for the sustainability for the ocean, viability for the next generations. It will be something attractive for youth, and it is going to be something that people are going to want to get into. But as they get into it, they're going to have to really be respectful of the practices and the tradition, because some people like to argue that at one stage they were all small scale, and then we all became large, and then we destroy everything. So so let's put some really good thinking about that, right? How to prevent, we don't need to repeat, right, what we already learned. So maybe now final round, right, in terms of your final thoughts on that. So now I'm gonna maybe reverse the order a little bit, right? So we'll start from Susana, and again, we heard you mention the small scale fisheries guidelines. John referred to that as well, so it'd be great if you wanted to speak to that a little bit as well, in terms of what we can use the small scale fisheries guidelines to help us and the small scale fishing people to cope and to really move ahead in this situation. Please, Susana.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I would like to, in my closing remarks, John mentioned in the beginning about focusing on the lowest level of governance. And here I would like to share that FAO is going to implement a project in the Philippines under the Global Umbrella Program to understand and to build capacity at the local level, so that the LGUs in the Philippines would be able to implement the small-scale fisheries guidelines. And part of the work that they're going to do is to understand what are the existing access that are already there, that the fishers do not have. For example, access to universal health care, access to social protection. What are the barriers at that local level? Why our fishers are not getting access to these things? So that will be I should say a positive note in the context of what we are saying here, to start at the on the importance of doing action at the local level where it matters, developing the capacity of the small scale fisher folk as well as the local government units. And
That
just to say very briefly that we need to address the different kinds of vulnerabilities, and these vulnerabilities are also come from the gender discrimination. It could be due to age, could be due to the socioeconomic status, ethnicity, and disability. So all of these things, when we think about the guidelines, we also need to think how we can address these things. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Susana, for that. I don't know where Julius went, but maybe we just ask you to go next to Mahmoud.
Thank you. There are like some good examples about how to make the coastal community viable in Bangladesh. Like there are some good case study and good examples taken by the government and community themselves, but these are not specifically like small scale fishers are part of this good initiative, but we know that vulnerability is very much context specific. So there is like not much focus that small scale fishers need to take care separately. So they have the small scale fishery has a very good contribution to the economy and social development, but their contribution are not well recognized, and there are not much discussion that they need special attention to address their vulnerabilities. In that case, fishers need to raise their voice by themselves. There are some cases like happening like against this 2 months ban in the Bay of Bengal. Fishers are raising their voice. Also need to develop leadership skills. So, civil society but in Bangladesh, there are thousands of non-government organizations working at a grassroots level. They made very good contribution towards social development, but there are only very few NGOs who are specifically working on fishers' right. So NGOs can facilitate that, and maybe the problem is funding. Maybe an on problem because civil society organizations usually do work on the specific area which has priority and which has good funding like from different sources. So in both, and also in case government political will is very necessary. Bangladesh is a very good examples like how to develop hillshire fisheries. So this species particularly got much attention, but not the overall small scale fisheries. So political will is necessary to implement these SSF guidelines, which could be facilitated by support from civil society organizations and the fishers organization themselves. So altogether they could move forward to address all these issues. And thank
That's
you.
great. Thank you so much, Mahmoud. Yin?
Thank you, Rina. In Myanmar context, I see the two opportunity in COVID. So the first one is like I've been working for the fishery law improvement for the inland fishery sector in Myanmar for 10 years. Like we've been improved fishery law and co-management, recognize the co-management arrangement for 4 state and region. But the government is reluctant to give like a long-term licensing for the small-scale fishing community related to the co-management of the fishing ground. This is the right. COVID give a kind of giving an opportunity to raise the long-term fishery management of the small-scale fishing community in a inland fishery area. We have to talk to the small-scale fishery organizations in our state and regions, and they are start asking for that. So currently, government economic release plans does not include small-scale fishery-related area, but this is the right time to raise this issue for the long-term management or the co-management. And the other one is COVID bring another opportunities for the marine fish worker as well. So before is we don't know how many people are migrants from the different states and regions, and then are engaging in a marine fishery sector. Nobody know how many fish are engaged in a marine fishery. Nobody know how many fish are passed away in a marine fisheries. But in COVID, everyone came back to their native. They have to register in a government general administration department. Now we have very rich data. How many people are migrating to the marine fishery and how many people are engaging in the hazardous works. So this is the right opportunity to raise for decent working condition for the small-scale fisheries and the fish worker in the marine fisheries.
That's a good point.
So,
All of a sudden, we have now better data.
yeah.
Okay. John, please. You have the last word.
No, I have really nothing more. I just want to re-emphasize what everybody else has said. I think this is the moment that we need to use. If we don't use this moment, then we will all regret it. So we need to valorize small-scale fishery differently. We need to talk less about poverty and food, other things. We need to emphasize the lot of dimensions about small-scale fisheries which we have discovered at this moment. So and that is the way to move towards a context where we can make sure that small scale fisheries are too big to ignore at the national level also, not only at other. So this is hugely important, and I hope that this will happen, and that your series of webinars will be a small but important contribution to making that point to the world. Thank you very much, Ratana, for this
Thank
opportunity.
you. That's a real marching order for all of us here. And I should be tired. It's 1 a.m., but I'm so energized at the moment, and I could continue. I would love to do that. But and the next section is next session is happening very soon, in about an hour from now. So we would definitely need to wrap this one up. But thank you so much for sharing that thought, and I really enjoy the fact that we could end up with some positive examples, something to really feel again, motivated, and there's a lot of food for thoughts that we can all do more, and then we definitely can go back to thinking again. And I think this will be something, if we do it right, by the time we get to the start of 2022, there will be a lot of celebration for small scale fisheries, and it will be great to see that. So thank you once again, everybody, for joining, and for the audience for your active participation. All right. So I'm just going to say goodbye for now. So again, the program continues all day. We now, after this session, we're going to go to Africa. So my colleague Moniba Isaac is waiting there to host us. So if you're not too tired, it's not so late for you, you definitely can join us. In the meantime, there is this art festival. So you just tune in, you listen to some nice songs and music and other kind of art, including our colleague in the Philippines is teaching kids how to make art from plastic. So join us there. So thank you again, everybody, for participating. I would now move you to the from the screen here, and we'll put in a closing scene. Okay, thank you. It's really great to see everyone, and I appreciate.